Jess, welcome to the Microjig shop. I know you're here to do some work. You want to start doing some woodworking. What exactly are you looking to do?
I would love to get started with cutting boards. And one of the main things is that I'm trying to move away from plastic cutting boards. I have plenty of those in the kitchen. I want to chuck those out and start using more of wood cutting boards. So I would love to get started doing that.
Excellent. Well, we've got some walnut, we've got some maple. Great materials for cutting boards. They're tight-grained, straight-grained woods. They don't have really open pores, so they don't absorb a lot of moisture. And most common woods are actually antibacterial as well. They actually are better than plastic cutting boards for health and safety. So we're in the right place. But the first thing we got to do, we've got some rough lumber here. These boards were sawn at a mill, but they haven't been processed yet, and we obviously can't make cutting boards out of what we've got here. So today we're going to work on the proper way to process this stock, okay?
Great.
So looking at the board, the first thing we're going to have to do is we need to join a face. We need all four faces, the two faces and the two edges of these boards, parallel, flat, and straight, and square to each other. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to glue them up. So we're going to start back here at the jointer.
Okay.
And this tool is designed to do exactly that. Now, the first thing we're going to want to do, though, is this piece is not perfectly straight and flat. So we need to flatten the back side. It's a little bit curved this way. There's a little cup here. And there's about 1/4 of an inch between the ends and the center. Now, we can joint this board as a single piece. We've got a big enough tool to do it. The problem is if we do that, then the bow that's in here, we have to remove the equal amount from both ends. It's about 1/4 of an inch on this board, maybe a little bit more. So we would lose all of that material to get it down to flat. But because we're doing cutting boards, we don't need it 4 feet long like this piece. We're going to cut it down into more manageable sizes, a little bit bigger than we want the cutting boards to be. And then that way, we only need to remove about half the actual bow that's in here, or even a little less. So that'll save us some material.
Cool. Yeah.
But before we get started, we got to talk a little bit about safety. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove my watch because we don't want any jewelry hanging off our wrists. We don't use gloves in the shop, even though we're handling wood that might give us splinters, because if the glove gets caught, it can drag your hand into the tool, and we don't want that.
No way.
We don't want, I've got my hearing protection here, but we don't want dangling necklaces. You've got yours tucked inside the shirt. That's excellent. And if we were in a cooler environment where we were wearing long sleeves, I always like to roll them back up onto the forearms. We don't want anything that could dangle or get caught in any of the machinery. And then, of course, we're going to have hearing protection and eye protection.
Yep. Check, check.
In the shop, your brain is the biggest safety device you've got. If you use your brain and think about what you're doing and are careful, you'll usually be safe. Okay. So, Jess, what we're going to do is we're going to use the jointer to flatten the face of the board, and we're going to make one edge parallel or 90 degrees to it after we're done flattening the edge. And the jointer is a machine that's designed specifically to do this task. There's a cutting head here, and the outfeed table that the board runs onto is set to the same height as these cutters. So as we push our board across, the infeed table is a little bit low, and we can set that for how much of a bite we want to take. But as it moves onto the outfeed table, that's where it's going to get stabilized and guide the rest of the cut. So the process is, the first thing we want to do is we want to look at the grain on the edge of the board. And if you look, you can kind of see that it's coming down and toward me like this. You see that? That's how we want to feed it through the machine, because the cutting head is down here, and as it cuts, the grain is falling away from the cutting head. So if it tears out, it's going to tear out down and out where we're going to cut. If we were to do it the other way, with the grain running up, then if it starts to tear, it can tear up into the board, and we would have to keep working it.
Yeah.
So you always want to look at your board and orient it. And if you can't see the grain on a rough cut, you may not be able to. We could always take a pass on the edge to expose the grain. But here it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to set our depth. Right now we're set to about a 32nd, so we're going to go a little deeper than that. I don't want to go too much. I only want to remove what I have to because we want to preserve as much of this thickness as possible. We're going to turn the machine on, and then this blade guard covers the blade until the part comes in, and then it will start cutting. And you're going to watch as I do it. You're going to see me. I've got my grip blocks in the way to hold the board. I'm not really pushing down so much. I want to be pushing more against the back of the machine, against the fence, so that with thinner boards, you don't want to flex it down into the blade. You want to let it have the bow because that's what we're trying to remove. Exactly. But as soon as you're past the blade, then we want to transfer all the force to the outfeed table because, again, this newly flattened face is going to ride on there, and that's going to guide the rest of the cut. We still have a hand back here, but as it moves forward, you'll see me transferring, and I'll step forward and transfer my weight to the outfeed table as soon as possible. So let's go ahead and try that. Hearing protection on.
Got it.
I'm going to turn the vacuum on. So again, we're going to start with more or less balanced here. This is pretty stable. It's not rocking, so that's good. We're going to come across. Now I'm transferring my weight to the front, and then as the back one comes in, I can transfer my weight there, so that we're guiding on the outfeed table. So you can see where we removed the material. This is that bow we were looking at earlier, the inside. We're going to need a couple more passes, but we're starting to see that removing. So now we'll have you do one. So with your right hand, you're going to guide in, and you're going to keep the pressure there to start with, and as you come forward, then you'll transfer it to the left hand, or the right hand, as you go through. But remember, you want to keep most of your pressure on here as soon as you can. Push down a little bit and back toward the fence and let it make its way through. Yep, bring your body forward, good. Excellent. Now we can check it again. Okay, we're getting close. Okay. Now these burn marks here, and you can smell it. Yep. Maple burns very, very easily, and that's because we're going so slow. Okay. And that's not a problem. You don't have the same body mass I do, and because I'm taller, yep, I'm able to put more force on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the cut down a little bit. And it should be a little easier to pass through. Okay. The other thing we can do is let the hooks on the back of the grip block come here. Yep. So you can use this one to push, but put your weight here. Got it. There you go. Transfer your weight to the front. Excellent. Take it all the way through so you're not exposing the blades. And then let's see what we got. Okay, that's flat and smooth. There's a little bit of a burn mark, but we're not going to worry about that. We'll get rid of that in the planer. So now that we've got this first edge done, or the face, we're going to turn it up on edge. I'm going to bring the fence in a little bit. Now we don't use the grip blocks for this, but we're going to keep the face up against the fence, which is 90 degrees to the bed, and we're going to let the machine take this edge off. We're going to clean it up the same way, and it'll be 90 degrees to the face here that we just cleaned. I'm just holding it from the top, but again, I want to make sure that as soon as I can transfer the weight to the front, I do. You can see we're already making that thing, that cut. All right. Yep, at least one more pass, maybe two. Excellent. Now what I like to do, we ran it through this way when we started, so I'm going to mark the wood. This is just a mark I use. It's not necessarily anything scientific, but this tells me that this face has been planed and it went in that direction. Okay. And that's going to be important when we get to the planer, because we need to make sure that it's going in the opposite way on the planer, because the planer is going to take the material off the top, not the bottom. And then we did this edge like so I'll do the same thing there. That tells me that it's been planed or jointed, and that that's the direction it's going in. All right, so we're going to go work through the rest of our boards here, get one face and one edge planed, and then we'll make our way to, or jointed, we'll make our way to the planer. Okay, Jess, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and plane these boards to thickness, and that will make the rough top here smooth and parallel to the bottom that we already have. We're not going to worry about this other edge. We'll take that off when we cut it at this table saw. But this was the grain direction. This was the direction, we marked it, that you went over the planer, like so, or the jointer. The planer, we're going to be doing the other face, but the grain is going the opposite direction because it's on the other side. So what we want to do is feed this through so that that's backwards down on the table. And then the other thing that's different is on the planer here, the cutter is at the top, not at the bottom. So we're going to take some off here, and you're going to see, because it's bowed this way now, you're going to see it removing from the middle first and working out to the ends. It's almost the exact opposite process of what we just did. Yeah. But between these two machines, we'll get stock that's prepped properly. Now, you'll notice there's a stop here. We're going to roll the unit down until this can go under that stop. That's roughly where you want the head to set to make your first cut. But we also don't know that all four of these pieces are the same thickness. So what we'll do is we'll just do a quick check on each one and make sure that it's going to go underneath there, because we don't want to get it stuck halfway through. It's not the end of the world, but it's not convenient. All right, so it looks like everything will go through that way. This one's already stuck. And we're going to make sure that it's going the right way. So now what's going to happen is, that's what these rollers are for, by the way, so you can feed the work through, then put them back on the roller to feed them through again. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and run this, and then in between each pass, we'll raise the bed up, which will cut a little bit more off, but we'll do all four, and then we'll raise it up one, we'll do all four, and we'll raise it up one. So again, I've explained it, I'll show you, and then you can do it. Great. All right, let's get the dust collection started. Put on your hearing protection. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep planing this side until we get it completely flat. If we wanted to go thinner, we would then flip it over, because you want to remove the equal amounts from both sides. But for now, we're going to leave it as thick as possible. So that one's already been done. So then you're going to grab the next one, this needs to be going backwards. So go ahead and push that, and you'll feel it grab. If you don't, just let it go and then come over to this side and pull it the rest of the way through. It's not high enough to get this one yet. Now this one, same thing, go backwards. Okay, now take the, flip it over.
Oh.
There you go. That one should grab. Now we're going to turn this half a turn. It has, this one doesn't have any marks on it, although there's measurements right here. But usually a half a turn is okay, unless it's really, really wide stock. And since we brought these through, we know they're oriented, you can just feed them automatically. And notice I'm stacking them in different piles, so I remember that this is the pile I'm working.
Yes.
All right, half a turn, and it's going clockwise.
So half a turn.
Yep. Now feed this one through again. And if you angle it just a little bit, it'll grab the corner first and it feeds more easily.
So would this one be the same case?
Yeah, flip that. Nope. Got to flip it end for end because we want.
Oh, I see, yes.
Yeah, we want the grain. Now this is the side that's cutting like it was on the jointer. You want it going the same direction. Nope, stop. We need to lower the.
Get ahead of myself.
Yep, there you go. Now you can flip that again, end for end.
End for end, got it.
Remember the angle.
Yeah.
Yep, and these two don't flip because you're not done with the one face yet.
And how long do you want to do the planing process?
Until they're all four the same size. So when this is gone, you're done.
Okay.
Now you're going to want to set the height.
Oh, yeah.
Flip that. Angle. There you go.
So this one we want to flip now.
Yep. All right, Jess, so we've got our wood initially prepped. The next session what we'll do is we'll rip these into strips, and then we'll get to gluing those strips together to do the first pass at our cutting boards. We're going to try a couple of different ways of making them, and we'll talk about that the next time. But we've got two faces that are parallel to each other and nice and smooth and flat, and then we've got the edge between the two is already set so that it's square and 90 degrees. We use the jointer to get the face flat and the edge 90 degrees. We use the planer to square them up and make them even in the same width, and all four of these pieces are now the same thickness. Mm-hmm. So we're doing a cutting board, but anything you're doing with hardwood lumber, this is what you're going to want to start with. You're going to want to start here, prep your stock properly, because that makes all the difference in the world. When we go to glue these pieces together, after we cut them, we may use the jointer again to make sure that when you go to glue it together, you get a good solid joint with no gaps, because although you can use clamps to squeeze a gap out, that just introduces stress, and we don't want that. This is actually quite good. You can see there's a very, very nice clean line here.
Yeah.
So we're off to a good start. Next time we'll use the table saw to rip the strips down, and then we'll either use the jointer or the planer, or maybe even both, to tweak them out, and we'll be able to lay up our cutting boards and start to see what they look like.
Great. Sounds good.
All righty. Well, welcome back, Jess. The last time we prepped our stock, we jointed one face, squared up an end, and ran it through the planer to get them parallel and flat. Today we're going to rip them into strips and then glue those strips back together to begin our cutting board. So up here, this cutting board is what we call a face grain. So it's just strips glued together the end to end, and we're going to glue that up first. But then, because you want an end grain cutting board, we'll then cross cut these pieces and then flip them on end and put it all back together. So it's going to take 2 glue ups to do that rather than 1,
okay.
But that's basically what we're looking to do. What we're going to do is just go ahead and cut these strips into like 1.5 inches wide. And then when we go to glue them up, we'll alternate the walnut and the maple. And then when we re-glue it back together, we can offset those so it becomes like a checkerboard pattern.
Great.
All right, cool. Let's get started with that. So we're gonna use the grippers to do the cutting. And we're going to first set the rip fence here. There's a scale on this side that tells you what your distance is that you're cutting. So we'll go ahead and set for 1.5 inches. And then in order to set the gripper up, we have the safe rip index here on the back of the gripper. So the cursor that's here, when you move it back and forth, that tells you where your center leg is. And we don't want to cut the center leg. So at 1.5 inches, we're going to want that not showing under the cursor. So we'll tighten the leg there, and now we can go ahead and make those cuts. The 1/2 inch leg will be holding the part we're cutting. The main leg will be holding the other half, and we'll make our way through. So let's get ready to do that, and I'm going to pull out a second gripper so that we can use 2, and we'll discuss the hand-over-hand technique.
Great.
All right, so Jess, what we're going to do is, the first thing we're going to do is bring the blade up to the proper height. And here you'll see we're going to raise the blade up so that the tooth is just about 1/2 to 3/4 of the way up above the material when you're getting ready to cut. That's about correct for a combo blade like this. We should probably be using a ripping blade, but a combo blade does both cross cut and rip cuts equally well, and this will be perfectly fine for this one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our gripper, and just like at the jointer, we're going to have one in each hand, and we're going to feed through. And as your grip passes the blade on the first gripper, you can take it off. The second one's going to go through, and then we'll bring the first one back around if we have to. This isn't that long. We can probably do it in 2, but we'll see how it works out. Both grippers are set up exactly the same. So whether you have to do 2 or 3 or whatever, it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about which one's going to be last.
Okay.
And then what you're going to do is when you're standing here, leave a little bit of room between, you're not going to stand directly behind the blade. You want to be a little bit to the left of it here so that if something does happen, you're not in the path of a kickback. We also have our riving knife here, which is set up to prevent the blade from being pinched if the kerf should close. I don't think that'll happen with this material, but you never know, and that's part of the insurance policy. So I'm going to start up the vacuum. We'll start the saw. I'll do one, and then you can do one. Now when I push, I'm going to be holding down onto the board. I'm going to be pushing forward with my gripper, but I'm also going to put just a little bit of pressure toward the fence. The gripper needs to ride the fence to guide through the part. grip.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of tool mark there. So we'll probably go ahead and joint this a little bit later just to make the joints clean. And you can see if we try to put this back together, there's a little bit of gapping. So the board is moving a little bit as we're cutting it. You're releasing some of the stress that's in the board. So joining it back together, it'll make a clean cutting board. The other thing is, unlike the joiner, you don't have to worry about transferring your grip over to the other side. Your grip should be pressing down back here because we want to get it through the blade. When you get through the blade, if you can, it's a little bit of a technique, but you'll notice I brought the two pieces back around. You're a little shorter, your reach isn't as long as mine here. You may not be able to do that. That's okay. Let the boards fall off the back. Don't try to reach across the blade or anything like that.
Okay.
So we're gonna make sure there's no dust or dirt. You're gonna start with the board tight against the fence, the gripper here, and then you're gonna just one hand and then follow through the other. When you lift this, come straight up off.
Okay.
All right, Jess. Now, one of the things I've noticed, again, I'm much taller than you are. I don't have any problem pushing these boards through, but I've got the reach with my body to keep the pressure down here. You're having a little bit of trouble with that, as we've seen. So we're going to go ahead and use the gravity heel for the gripper, and we're going to mount it right back here. And the way the gravity heel works, obviously, if we had a heel here that was fixed, that doesn't work because your gripper isn't actually touching the board properly. But by loosening that slightly, now it moves out of the way when you're in the middle of the board, but it drops down to hook the end, and that will help you push through.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep.
I love how there's a solution to
There's
help me
always
out.
a solution.
Awesome.
So we're going to set up both of these gravity heels with the gripper. In this case, we're cutting 1.5 inches thick, so there won't be any issue with cutting through the gravity heel.
I see.
But it is designed to be sacrificial. So if we were making a narrower cut, I would just let the blade go right through it. But what's going to happen now is when you go to, the first one isn't going to matter, but when you go to push the second one through, your gravity heel is going to drop down and you won't have that gripper sliding forward on you. And so we're going to be able to do that right now. Now the other thing is, because of now that we're beyond the end of the blade, we don't want the gripper to be tipping. That's always a bad thing. So we're going to drop the balance support down on both sides. It must have locked up when it dropped. So we're going to drop the balance support down and lock it in on both of the grippers. And that way, because obviously you don't want to mess with this while you're in the middle of a cut. So, but this will keep your gripper stable while you make the cut. So once again, you're going to do the same cut, but this time when you bring the second one back around, let it drop down there, and that'll be your second pass, and you should be able to push right through.
Cool.
So let's start with that and see if that works better for you.
Okay.
And this is something that, for anybody who has trouble reaching across the table or just doesn't want to, just leave that there for the moment. Start with this one in your left hand.
Okay.
And then after you turn the saw on, you can bring this one back around.
Got it. All right. Let's see how it goes.
So that did work a lot better. All right, Jess. So in this case, you'll notice that the maple is pretty homogeneous. There's not a lot of outstanding grain. I mean, you've got this bit there that we might want to put somewhere else. The walnut, on the other hand, does have a distinct and pronounced grain pattern. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to go ahead and start setting these pieces together. And like we'd mentioned before, we're going to alternate them. But then once we get them, basically set together, we're going to look at them and we're going to decide what we like or don't like with grains. And we can flip them around, move them, do whatever, and make it work the way we want to. So that's a pretty good sized cutting board. It'll be roughly the same size when we're done, although we can trim it back, and we will trim a little bit off it. So what I'm talking about here is I don't see any real blemishes. There's a little bit of a pin knot there and something there. So if you're going to have that sort of thing, they should all be on the same side. So this, we would put those on what would be the bottom of our cutting board. And we can look at this one and see if it's, see, that's the one we flipped over. I would rather have that than this, so we'll keep that like so. And then the other thing we can do is if we take one of these away, actually, no, we've got one more, so that's good. Because what we want now is we want it to be not even, right? Because what we're going to do is when we cut these strips, we're going to reverse them, and that'll give us the checkerboard pattern. So it's good that we have the right number of pieces here. But you'll also notice that, like this one, if I press it back here, there's a little bit of a gap there, and again, we've released some stress in the wood when we were doing this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we'll joint these pieces one more time on each face. What we'll actually do is joint one face and then run them through the planer for just a light pass so that they're all the same, but then we know when we put them together, we don't want to see any gaps here, even small ones. We could crush them out with a clamp, but as we discussed last time, the problem is if you're applying so much pressure to close the gaps, you're actually building stress into your cutting board. And that's just, there's no reason to do it. So we're going to work this through. And again, on this cutting board, it doesn't matter so much about the grain pattern itself. I've got a little bit of sapwood here, less there, so I'd probably use this face. But sometimes when you're gluing up smaller boards to make a larger panel, you don't want a very noticeable grain line. And so you'll kind of play with them and move them around to get the best grain pattern. This looks pretty good, and I think it's pretty good to work with. I'm going to grab a pencil. And we're going to mark the pieces because we like them the way they are now. So we're going to mark them so that when we go to reassemble this, we can do it in the same order. And basically, if you do a delta from top to bottom, then when we go to put these back together again, we'll know that that one goes there because you can line up the deltas back up. Now, see, that one doesn't go there, and that one doesn't go there. So there. So that's why we do that, so we can line this all back up. It doesn't really matter if they're aligned this way, but in this case, it's just a matter of making sure that we've got them back in the order we wanted them in the first place.
Yeah, smart.
So the next thing we're going to do is go to the jointer, and we're going to take one light pass off of one face of each of these, and then we'll go over to the planer, and we'll take one light pass off the other face of each. All right, Jess, so again, we're going to joint these edges. There's a little bit of tool mark here, and there's, a little bit of gap. We want to get rid of all of that. So we're going to take a very light pass, maybe a 30-second or a little less even. And in this case, we're going to use the gripper to go because these are narrow, and the grip blocks that we used for the full boards would be a little tippy right here. So again, you're going to keep one in each hand. We'll put the flat face against the fence here. And so you're going to have one, and then you're just going to follow through, and same as before. We're going to start here. You're going to transfer your force to the other side, and you're going to let it grind through. So let me fire up the dust collector, and we'll do one. Hand on, everything tight, and then you're going to find that this is very easy to do. Because it's narrow and we're taking a light cut. But again, we're going to want to be watching for the grain direction. And we'll want to mark the face so we know which way to go through the jointer. should be prepared. We had marked these boards previously, so now you're going to need to stand them on end, with the lines up, and then rearrange them back into the original setup we did.
Okay, should be quite easy. That, and this one here, and there we go.
Cool. All right. So the next step is going to be just to glue all these together. Now, notice that there's literally no gapping in here, okay? There's no spaces. That's exactly what we want. You don't need a whole lot of clamping pressure here to hold those together while they dry, and we don't want it because, again, we don't want to build stress into our design. We've just spent a lot of time getting rid of stress, making these all line up. So this will be absolutely perfect, and next time we get together, we'll set it up and we'll get these clamped together, glued up, and then we'll be ready for the next step.
Right on.
Cool.
Cool.
Nice work.
Exciting.
All right, Jess. So we got our stock all prepped. We've got it all laid out the way we want it. We've reestablished the group with our marks, so we know it's exactly the way we laid it out, but these are still separate, and now we got to glue them together. Gluing is easy, but preparing and being prepped is important, especially when you have this many glue joints. The glue has about a 20-minute working time. We don't want to be having it drying here while we're still applying glue there. So a couple of things. We're working on top of our dovetail table. That'll help us clamp some of this stuff down. We're going to use a pair of long bar clamps to apply pressure across this way, but we're also going to use our dovetail clamps to hold the edges down so that everything stays nice and flat. But we don't want to get glue all over everything, so we've got parchment paper underneath. I use either wax paper or parchment paper. Both of them work really well for protecting surfaces from glue. We've got our glue. We're using a waterproof glue, in this case Titebond 3. It's waterproof, so you're never going to want to put this in the dishwasher, but it is going to get washed. It's a cutting board, and this will keep the thing from coming apart over time. We have a glue roller, which we'll use to spread the glue, and then we've got a couple of straight edges here that we're going to use with our clamps to hold these two edges down once we get it all laid out. So the easiest way to do this is to simply flip all of the pieces down the same way, because these are the edges that are going to get glue, right?
Yep.
So now we're going to do that all but the last one. So now we're going to put glue on each of these going across, and then we're just going to turn them back up and stick them together as we go. All right, so basically we don't need a ton of glue. Anything that gets squeezed out while you're clamping is wasted.
Okay.
But you need enough that you're not going to starve the joint. It's got to be a good joint. So we're just going to lay a couple of beads of glue down and use our cute little roller here to apply the glue, get it nice and even going across. I applied a little bit more on the first one because a lot of the glue ends up on the roller, but that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hand that to you.
Yep.
And we'll try just two. Notice I'm not doing anything complicated here. I'm just going to lay a bead of glue down using the nozzle that's on the bottle.
Oops.
That's okay. That's why the parchment paper is here. It's going to get messy.
So is that a new bottle of glue?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's more than enough for what we're doing here.
I was going to ask because the tip looks really clean. And
I actually cleaned it out because you pretty much have to clean them out all the time.
Yeah.
All right. Now, it's easier if you do a little bit of a separation in between them.
Actually, right hand.
Yep, do it the way you need to.
All right.
And keep in mind, too, you'll know when you get done here how much you put on and whether it's too much or too little.
Okay.
You can always add more later.
Good point.
That doesn't look too bad. And you'll notice if you look at the first one, you can see how it's kind of flowing out and starting to lay level.
Now, do we want to get the edges pretty saturated?
No, just the face is what we need to do. Because again, when we squeeze these together, it is going to squeeze out a little bit.
Okay.
And we want a little bit of squeeze out, but we don't want, like, you know, glue just dripping off the thing, because that's just waste.
So it's really all about the prep work.
Yeah, it is.
To have a nice finish.
Anytime you're gluing up a lot of pieces at the same time, making sure that you have a plan in mind for how you're going to assemble, and then having everything prepped. You know, you don't want to have all your glue spread and then be running around trying to find the clamps or, you know, locate the parts you need or whatever. Because if the glue starts to set up too early, then it becomes much more difficult. It's not so bad with a cutting board because it's all flat to flat. But if you're assembling like a complex piece of furniture with mortise and tenon joints, tongues and grooves that have to go together and stuff like that, it can get complicated.
What about like debris like that? We want to pick those out, right?
Yeah, if you can. All right, excellent. Just go ahead and set that over here on the parchment paper. All right, so now we'll bring this one in, and we're just going to start flipping these up just like this. And you can kind of see me wiggling them just a little bit together. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and flip each one up, and then don't worry about squeezing them together too much. That's what the clamps are going to do.
Okay.
And we're going to align one edge because it doesn't really matter. They don't, you know, the pencil lines are there to show us what order we arrange them in, but they don't have to line up perfectly.
Got it. Ooh, this one's already tacky.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's why the prep is so important. And if you were worried about it, you could glue up half of it and then get that under clamps, glue up the other half, get that under clamps, and then glue them together. But we've got enough time on this one.
A little wiggle.
All right, excellent. Now, the blue clamps behind you, grab those. Yep. We can use parallel clamps. We can use bar clamps. These, the bottom is going to come forward. So undo the screw a little bit.
Okay.
And then I'm going to bring the bottom forward until it locks. And then the screw will pick up the difference. I'm going to slide this forward just a little bit so that, there you go. Now that we're off the end, we can clamp it. And just apply enough pressure. It doesn't have to be a lot. There you go. Looks like we're getting some pretty good squeeze out here. I want to put one more in the center. Now, if we're going to use the dovetail table to clamp this down and keep it flat. But if I didn't have a dovetail table, what I would probably do is put a couple of clamps underneath and then a couple on the top. That way the ones underneath are going to push it upward, but the ones on top are going to push it down and it'll stay level. But in this case, I think we're going to be good with what we've got. And because we're going to work onto the table using the dovetail clamps, it's going to make it easier. And you can see here we're getting a little bit of squeeze out all along all the lines, and that's exactly what we want. And it doesn't have to be super dreadfully tight. Oh, this one's a little bit into the groove. There we go. Doesn't have to be super dreadfully tight because we're not trying to force the joints closed. We have good joints. We made good joints. All right. So now what we want to do is I want to put these on the ends and clamp them down in the groove so that we keep this flat. So again, I've got a little bit more parchment paper. That's going to keep everything from sticking together. This just happens to be the perfect size to fit in between the clamps. All right, so let's grab some dovetail clamps.
Okay.
There's two. And what do we got? We got 4 grooves there, so use all 4. I'll grab a few more. Yeah, the parchment paper, you can just fold it right up out of the way if you want to, whatever. Won't be in our way. This is just about keeping the parts flat on the table. Nice. Now, normally, with most wood glues, you're going to wait minimum of 20 minutes for it to set up. This, I would leave it a lot longer. We're going to leave this overnight. And the next time we get together, what we're going to do is we'll trim the ends off using a panel cutting sled on the table saw. And then we're going to cut it into strips, which we can then rearrange and re-glue. So we'll be doing that the next time we get together. Okay. But we'll leave this overnight, and then the next step will be to cut it and re-glue it, and then from there we'll set up a program on the CNC to flatten it, make it level and flat, parallel on both sides, and then we can talk about juice grooves and the other things we want to do.
Cool. Exciting.
Excellent. Okay, so Jess, this is what we did last time. We got this far. It's pretty smooth. They're not perfectly aligned, but certainly good enough for the next step. And again, there's very little glue squeeze out, so we don't have a lot of cleanup to do here, which is good. And, so ultimately this is where we're starting out. And now what we're going to do is we're going to rip one side off or cross-cut one side nice and smooth, and then we're going to cut it into chunks, going strips this way, so that we can rearrange it into a checkerboard pattern. Mm-hmm. Now, the hard part is this is very wide. There's our blade. If we try to guide this, there's no good way to do it from back here with the miter gauge. So we're going to use a jig that's called a panel sled. So this is our panel sled here. It has two of our zero play guide bars on the bottom that ride in the miter slot and let it go front and back for us.
Cool.
Now, you'll notice that the fence is on the front. Usually the fence is on the back for sleds, but again, if we bring it back far enough to start that cut, it gets tricky back here. So with a panel sled, what that allows us to do is to have a wider piece, and we can cut all the way across it before we get too far beyond the end of the table. So that's how we're going to play this one out. So we're going to set this on here. And we've already set it up, if you notice, so that this side is very close to our blade.
Yeah.
And that's intentional. So now we know exactly where that's going to cut. So we're going to bring this up, the blade, until it's set up where we want it to be. All right, so now we're going to put our hearing protection on. And essentially, so we're going to want to start with the hand on the fence here, and you're going to stand at this side of the blade, and you're just going to push it until you get past the blade here. When that part falls off, we can move it over and bring it back. All right, so I'll make the first pass, and then we'll set up a stop block, so we can cut each one the same. Now it looks like this is the shortest one this way, so we should be able to cut all of this off nice and clean now. Now I'm going to pull it to the side and back it off. So now we've got some nice clean strips. And you got this funky little piece. So now we need to set how far we want to make our cuts. And I think that they probably should be about the same as this. Or do we want to go that way with it? Let's see. We're going to take these, and we're going to switch them back and forth. So it doesn't really matter how wide they are as long as we keep them the same, but I think that for a square pattern, we'll want to do the same width as our part here. So, we don't want to have the part trapped between the blade and the rip fence. You know, we could set to whatever that block is, but then the part's trapped here and can come flying back out at us, and that's no good. So we're going to use a dado stop. The center part of the dado stop is exactly 3 inches long, and that will allow us to put our piece up, and as long as this is in front of the blade, when that part comes off, it'll hit there and we'll be good. It won't bind up. There's plenty of clearance here. So this is 3 inches. We're at 1 3/8 inches here. So we're going to set to 4 3/8. We're going to bring it up because of we want to make sure that when we slide our panel over, it's going to hit that. And now we'll cut that one off too. All right, you ready? So we're going to make sure it's back behind the blade. Slide it over until it touches. Yep. Now grab all the way in the front, and you're going to mostly push with this hand. You're just holding the front so things don't go wonky on you. So go ahead. Just let it go. Yep. There you go. Now slide the whole thing back. So the zero plate keeps the sled from getting into the blade, and it guides the sled for us, and it gives us a pretty good cut.
All right, keep going?
Yep. Now it does start to get tricky here when we come down to the end like this. So the next couple we'll do with the gripper. All right, Jess, so for these last couple of strips, we are going to use the fence, and we're going to have the gripper here, one in each hand, to help make the cut. And again, like before when we were ripping the full-size pieces, we're going to use the gravity heel here behind the gripper to allow you to finish pushing it through without having to reach too far across the table. Mm-hmm. So once again, I'll do one, and then you can go ahead and finish it up. Now we're just about where we want to drop the balance support down. So I'll do that here, and we'll add one to this one as well. Now remember, we're going to start over here, and then as soon as this one is capable of being put up against the fence, you're going to keep it there, make your cut. It's just like what we did before. Right, that's good.
But it also has to be up on the fence.
Always riding the fence, correct. Perfect. All right. Now on this one, you're going to want to drop the balance support now. And now we'll get one more slice out of it, just like you did before. And now that balance support is not only going to help you put on the you're good.
It's not hooked on.
There you go. Very good. So we didn't have a whole lot of waste.
Yeah. Wow, look at that.
So basically, this is the glue up we're going to do. And we're at 19 and a half here, 19 and a half there.
Wow.
So far it's coming out good. We can make it 18 by 18 or whatever you want to do. It's all in the glue up now. Okay, Jess, so we're going to be gluing up just like last time. Again, we're going to flip the pieces down, apply the glue, and then flip them back up. We can start with this one in place. But this time there's one difference, and that's that we can't just glue it up into strips, not worrying about the ends. In this case, we have to worry about these ends. We don't want them, not aligned because that ruins our checkerboard effect. Mm-hmm. So if you remember last time, we clamped this on top to keep the pieces all aligned that way. This time we're going to clamp it to the table here, and then as you glue and put each one of these in, you're going to butt it up against that piece. Yeah. And that way, we should keep this checkerboard alignment pretty good. So why don't you grab a couple of clamps. You can slide them in there. And again, just, 3 clamps or something on there. I'll get the glue. So again, we're going to glue this up, and then afterwards, once it's all glued, we'll put this piece in and we'll put a clamp in between them this way. But our main clamping effort is going to be going front to back because of the whole setup of this.
And we'll be using the longer
clamp,
longer body clamps. Cool.
I'm going to swap.
Just going to put a 4th one for good measure.
Yeah, that'll be nice. All right, so this one's going to be the way it is, and then we're just going to move all these over and flip them, just like we did before. Slide this one well out of the way if we need to. There you go. There's your glue, there's your roller. And you remember what you have to do from the last time.
Yeah,
start up here and we'll just start putting them together.
Okay. So last time we did like 2 strips of glue.
Yeah, and on the first one you may have to add a little more glue just because the
the roller
some of it's going to stick on the roller.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
And these are end grains, so they are going to, normally you would be worried about them absorbing a little more than normal glue. But these are walnut and maple, so they're pretty tight grain. There's not a lot of pores on these where they're at. All right, good. Yep, right up against this one. All right.
Does it matter how saturated the ends are? Or?
No, we're good.
Okay.
Some of it will squeeze out as we apply the clamps.
Okay. Okie dokie.
All right. Slide this toward you so that we're in between the yellows. Mm-hmm. Perfect. I'll put this one in here. We'll get that lined up. So now, These all look reasonably well lined up. We're just going to apply a little bit of pressure, just enough to hold everything. And then we'll put some more over here. So again, at this point, we're not that worried about level up here. It's pretty decent. It's only about 1/16 of an inch out, if anything. But we're going to plane this down with the CNC next, after this glue all dries up. And so when we do that, we're going to take this all down, and we will have a nice flat surface. Then we'll flip it over and do the other side, and we'll have two parallel surfaces that are flat and a specific thickness that we've got. So this looks pretty good.
It's coming alive.
Right, and now we've got that checkerboard pattern we were looking for before, and it looks, I don't see any real huge gaps. I think this looks pretty good, so I'm happy.
Me too.
All right,
Yay.
Next time we'll sit down at the computer, we'll put together a program for the CNC to plane this down, and then we'll work through that.
Right on.
All right. So this is our cutting board, and so far it's looking pretty good. It is, it needs to be leveled off. We've got some glue sticking up, and not all of these are exactly the same height, but that's totally expected. So we need to plane it down. Now, in theory, we could run this through our planer. We do have a 20-inch planer, and this is about 19.5 square, but that's going to be a little bit difficult, and it would be really hard to do all of these different grain pieces without tearing out some. Mm-hmm. And so the CNC here is a great tool for doing this. We're going to use a rather large fly cutter, is what it's called. It's 1.5 inches diameter, and that's going to start in the middle, and we're just going to shave down the entire top. It may take a couple of passes, but we're going to take a 30-second off at a time, and we're going to, even out the one face, then we'll flip it over, and we'll do the other face at the same, immediately after. So not only will it be flat, but it'll be two parallel sides. Great. And once we have that, then we'll go over to the table saw, we'll reference off our good edge, we'll shave the other side using the rip fence, and then we'll use our panel sled to trim these two edges, which are the edges where everything got glued up. So it's not perfect, but that's okay. We got to cut it down anyway. Now, we've got our CNC set up, and we're using the MatchFit Workholding Kit. I've changed it up a little bit, though. Usually I have two of the stops, the edge guides, on the long side, but in this case, I'm doing two here and one over there, and the reason being that this is a little bit too wide for us to be able to get clamps side to side. Our working area here is 22 inches. We've got 19.5. There's not enough room for even our smaller clamps. So we're going to start with an edge guide over there. We're going to use the ramp clamps here, and we're going to bring them in and lock them into place. So we're pushing against these two stops here. So now, this board cannot move front to back, and it can't move this way because we've got it tied on, but there's nothing over here to keep it from pulling this way. It might not do it, but an overabundance of caution, we don't want to have to start this all over again. Yeah. So what I've done here is I created a little piece of extra spoil board, if you will. It's attached to the, it's beyond our spoil board. We couldn't have cut this with the CNC the way we made our spoil board, but this just adds a little bit of extra room. It won't interfere with our bridge here, but it gave me a little bit of extra room. So now I can put a couple of our ring clamps in here. And now we've got clamps and stops on all four sides of our cutting board. So it literally cannot move here. The only way it could move, in theory, it might be able to pull up off, but we're clamping it really well, and B, the bit here is designed specifically not to do that. So I'm not worried about that. This is the heavy part. It's not going to go anywhere. Now we've got it so that it can't move in any direction, and that's going to work. So now what we're going to do is we're going to wake up the machine. We're going to let it center itself, find home. This is a known home location because we're using our edge guides. And so everything else I've already written the program, we'll run that off. So let's go get to that.
Sweet.
All right, so the first thing we've got to do is we're just going to turn on the machine. And it's going to wake itself up. And now we're going to home all the axes. The machine, when it's off, could be moved. So even though it knows where it's at when it's turned off, if somebody moved it, it doesn't know where it's at anymore. So think about this process as if you woke up in your own bedroom in the middle of the night. Power's out. It's totally dark. Okay? You don't know where you are, but you know the room you're in. So what do? You reach out a hand and you walk slowly until you touch a wall or your bureau or some known position, and then all of a sudden you know where you are. That's what this is doing. So it came up in Z, it moved over in Y, and now it's moving forward in X until it touches off with sensors that are built in. And that tells it where it is, where the edge of the table is, so it's not going to try and move beyond what it should do. All right, so now that we've gone to our home location, that's the 0 point for the program I wrote. Now I'm just going to move the head into the middle of the board. We happen to know that this board cups up a little bit, so if we zero our Z-axis off the center, then, or close to the center, we're not going to cut too deep by accident. Now, the machine knows right now where the corner of this board is or the corner of the program we're going to run. We told it that. What it doesn't know is how thick our board is and how long our bit is going to extend below the collet. So by touching off the bit to the top of the material, we tell it where that interface is, where they meet. And that's our Z0. So we need to get our wrenches out. And we're going to swap out from the bit that's already in the machine. And this works just like any other router. You've got a collet, a couple of wrenches. And we're going to switch here from a 1/4 inch collet to a 1/2, because we're going to use a 1/2 inch bit.
Is there like a certain depth the bit has to go in?
It has to, the bit needs to have, it needs to fill at least 3/4 of the collet, but the shank, the body of this bit is plenty long enough to do that. So no, there's not a specific height. You could work that way, but then you would have to have a measuring device to set that. In this case, we're just going to come down until we touch the top and then tell it that's 0, and everything works down from there. Now, we could bring it down manually and just touch it until it starts to scrape, but this particular machine has the ability to do it electronically for us. So we're going to plug in our setting guide, and now it's going to come down until it touches makes an electronic connection there. And the machine is already accounting for the thickness of this tool.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So that's all set up for 0 now.
Very nice.
So we're going to put our dust shield on. And now what we're going to do is we're going to find our program, which is on this thumb drive. And it's a 20 by 20 planing program. I just wrote it that way. There it is. So we can go ahead and start that, and that will get us going where we want to. Now it should lower itself in. You'll hear it cutting. And then it'll start moving much quicker once it gets lowered into place. Now it's just going to make a little box pattern, like mowing a lawn, out further and further each time until it shaves the whole thing. And you'll be able to see the cut once it gets big enough that the dust shoe isn't on it. You can start seeing it there. But notice, if you look, you can see it's a very, very clean cut. Nice smooth edges in between your parts. Because we're rotary cutting it, instead of like a planer cutting this way, we don't have to worry about tearing up chips. It'll still need to be sanded after we're done and when we're ready to do the finishing, but this will get it pretty smooth.
Yeah. And then doing the mineral oil is going to darken the wood a bit.
Oh yeah. Well, it'll darken the walnut for sure. It won't make much difference to the maple. But that's what you want, more contrast.
Yeah.
Okay, Jess, so that's the first run. And yes, we definitely have some areas that haven't been cut yet. So we're just going to raise our Z height up a little bit. We're going to go back to the center, more or less, where we started. And we're going to reset that Z height with the same bit. And that way, by moving the Z down, it's a new 0 point. And it'll cut a 32nd down from that point. So we're going to do that same process over. And tool set. And hopefully it'll get all of it this time, but if not, we can just run it 2 or 3 times. You can go a little bit deeper. You don't have to have a specialty bit like this. You can use any flat bottom bit that'll, but the bigger the bit, the faster you get the job done.
Yeah.
So I'm going to turn the dust collector on and we'll start up again.
Okay. All right, Jess. So now we've got our board pretty well set. On this face, we did manage to carve all of the corners. Everything's done. A little bit of fuzz here, but again, we're going to cut it, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just moving this out of the way. Yeah, it's looking gorgeous already.
Yeah, it's coming out really well. I'm pleased. All right, so now we're going to loosen up the clamps. We're just going to flip this board straight over. It is a heavy thing. We're sitting on top of the flat face. So now, when we cut this face, it'll not only be flat relative to itself, you won't have all these bumps, but it'll also be perfectly parallel to the part that we just cut.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're looking for. And
tool set.
Where it says tool set, yes. Thank you. All right. Put our dust shoe back on. So now we're going to go ahead and move this over to, we're going to take it off here, go over to the table saw, and we'll go ahead and make our cuts there. All right, Jess, so now we've got our board planed down. It's the same thickness all the way around. It's nice and flat and smooth on the top. It needs to be sanded, but overall it's pretty good. The next step is we want to square it up, and these edges are a little rough. We're going to trim them. So this is our best edge. We're going to use that as our reference. That's the one that was butted up against the yellow bar when we glued this up.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to use the panel sled again, and because this fence is perpendicular to the blade, this will be a 90-degree corner. So we're going to slide this just past the notch here, just enough so that we can shave all of these ends as we go across. And then what we'll do is we'll just keep rotating until we work our way through all 4 sides.
Got it.
Or the other 3 sides. So I'm going to raise the blade up. I'll do the first one, as usual, and then you can pick up the others. Back up so that I'm behind the blade. The edge of this is pretty darn close to that blade, so you can see here it's not quite covering that, so we're going to bring it out just a whisker.
Nice.
Now you can see that that's a nice clean edge that we can then put on here, and now you can cut the next piece. Yeah, make sure there's you've got a lip here all the way down now, so you're in good shape.
Okay.
So go ahead and start the saw, and then just a nice straight pass right across. Nice. There you go. Turn it 90 degrees. Nope, the other way. We already cut this one. Now that's the last side that needs cutting. Make sure you're nice and tight over here. See how this is gapping here? Yeah, that's just about exactly where you want to be.
Okay.
So we've made a good mess here today, but we got what we want. So now we've got a nice cutting board that's smooth on both sides, parallel, top to bottom.
Looks great.
And you've got nice square corners and excellent edges. We're good to go. The next step is we're going to program the CNC again. We're going to go back to the CNC, and we're going to program it so that we can cut a blood groove in here. And we'll talk about maybe we want to put a little triangular well in the corner and see how that looks. We'll do a little programming, and then we'll use the CNC to do the work for us.
Right on. Cool.
All right, Jess, so we're ready for the next steps. Now, the next thing we're going to do, we do want to put the blood grooves in here, but I want to wait till the last to do that because we need to radius the corners that you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then we also wanted to put, you wanted some finger grooves in here to pick it up.
Yep.
Normally on a rectangular board, it would be only 2. You have the option here to do 2 or 1 on each edge, whichever you want to do. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's the same setup all the way around. So we can do either one of those. But we're going to do that first. And the reason being that we're going to use the router table, and it's just easier and more convenient if you're going to do something on the edges without having the radiuses. So we're going to do those first.
Okay.
Then we're going to mark the radiuses. We'll cut them off on the bandsaw close to the line. And then we're going to use a hand router with this template here. And we're going to round over the corners. So we can do this template set up for a 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, or 1 1/4 radius. So you can choose what size you want. I think it's either going to be the 1 or 1 1/4. That looks pretty good there. Or you can do like a 1 inch here. But either way, we'll figure that out. We'll mark it and cut it. But the first thing we're going to do is set up the router table so that we can cut the handhold grooves.
Great, let's do it.
Okay, Jess, so now we've got the router table set up, and I want to explain what we're planning to do here. We've got the bit in here. Now this bit has a flat bottom, but it's radiused on the edges. It's called a dish carving bit or a bowl carving bit. And it allows you to do things like carving out a pocket, like so, and it leaves nice round corners in the sides, but when you're actually milling, it gives you a nice flat bottom. We're not using it for that per se. We're going to adapt it to make your finger grips.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do is we're going to do it this way.
Ah, I see.
So we're going to lower the unit onto the bit and then move it back and forth between a pair of stops. We'll then flip it over and do the other side. I've set this pretty much to the middle, but if it's a whisker off the middle, it won't matter because once you get done doing both sides, it will be centered. And because it has a flat bottom on the bit, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit off. You won't have any, you'll have a nice flat bottom, but round, comfortable edges.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've put a piece of tape here that is the same width as the bit. So this is just a visual reference. When we're working, you'll know where the bit is, even though you can't see it underneath the part. And then we've also marked here and here. Those are going to be the stop points for the routing.
I see.
Okay, it's going to go left and right, and that's going to route that bit. Now, we're not going to rely on the markings to do that. So what we're going to do, we've got some stop blocks. So I just put a dovetail groove in a solid piece of maple. This goes, line it up to the inside edge of the tape that's there, and then just clamp it in place. You can let the blocks sit tight on the table.
Got it.
That way you'll know it's square.
It's pretty neat.
So these are measured, basically they're both exactly the same distance away from the bit. So as we move back and forth to make the cut, it'll be even. If we wanted it on one side more than the other, we could move the blocks either way. There's a lot of different ways you can play it, but in this case we want it centered, so that's what we're going to go for. Now the other thing is, while we're doing this, we don't want it tipping like this while you're cutting. That would be not helpful. So what we're going to do is use our, and this is a plan that's available on the Microjig website. I call it a router table pressure jig. So we're going to mount this so that as you move this back and forth, it can't tip. So there's a dovetail groove right there. Nope, the other way. You want the, yep.
Oh, I see.
You may have to slide the piece up. There you go. So basically, you're going to start with the bit up, like the part up above the bit. We're going to drop it down on, slide it to the block, slide it back to the other block, bring it up and out. And we're going to do a couple of steps coming up. So we're going to start with a certain depth. We'll do that. We'll turn the board 180 degrees, do the same edge again to center it. Then we'll turn it 180 degrees this way and do those ends. So let's go ahead and get our hearing protection set up.
Can you tell me how you measured where to put these stops?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, if I line the bit so that the cutting edges are perpendicular to the fence, like I've got it here, then basically what I did was I took how long I wanted it to be here, subtracted that from the overall, divided that in half, which told me the distance, and in this case it was like 11 and 11/16 or something, right there.
Yeah.
And then I'm kind of sort of, there are ways we could measure it exactly, but if this finger hole is a 32nd of an inch off to one side or the other, nobody's going to know.
Yeah.
The human eye can't pick that up in small variances like that unless they're close together. So this will be more than close enough. I did the same thing if you rotate the bit the other way. So now the cutting edges are parallel to the fence. That's a pretty good reference line. And I've set that so it should be more or less centered right here.
I see, yeah.
But again, it may not be perfect, which is why we're going to cut it from both sides, and then the distance from the edge to the start of that cut will be the same for both. So that's a little trick. Anytime you need to center something, get as close as you can. If you can cut it from both sides, it'll give you an exact center every time.
Cool. And then to lift it up to turn it 180 is the same way we're going to place it down, right?
Yep. It's the easiest thing to do is going to be to start with a corner down, and then you're just going to bring it down slowly right onto the bit, and then back and forth. And again, we've got the pressure jig here, so it can't come out this way.
Yeah.
We've got the blocks here. Makes it very easy to do without having to worry about, we're taking all the accidental moves out
Exactly, yeah, which is great.
So on that side, let's bring the bit up just a little bit. Let me get a rule so I can see what I'm doing.
Okay, let me grab my earphone or earplugs.
All right. So I'm just going to use this board so we can see what we're doing. So go ahead and that handle right there, you should be able to turn it. Okay, a little bit more. That's probably good. Looks like about an eighth to a quarter of an inch, 3/16, somewhere in there. We're going to take just a couple of passes, but it's always better to take a couple of light passes with the router rather than try to do it all at once with a heavy pass.
Okay.
Turn on the unit. All right, I'll do the first one. So I'm going to set that in there. Bring this down. Bring it toward me. Push it back toward you. And then I'm going to flip it around and do the same thing again. You can hear there's a little bit of a cut there, but not much. And there's your first hole.
Wow.
We'll go a little bit deeper than that, but that's a good start.
Yeah.
All right, now it's your turn.
Okay.
Yep. Not quite the same thickness. There you go. Perfect. All right, now we're going to bring that bit up a little bit more.
Okay.
We can go as deep as we want, but there's not much point in going too much deeper than the radius that's here.
I see that.
So bring it up a little bit, right about there, I think. And then we can check it, and if we want to make a third pass, we certainly can.
Okay.
Do it one more time. All right. Try those again.
Okay. Start up this. Yeah, I think that's
All right.
good.
So now, this one's got just a little bit of a divot there. That, if that's all that is, we could sand that out. Let's check the other side. Actually, this one's pretty clean. So if we just do a slight radius right here, which we're going to want to do anyways, right?
Yeah.
Just a little bit of a round over. We're going to round over these edges. Just a whisker of a round over there.
That's going to take care of that.
I think we're good.
Okay.
So if you're happy with the depth of them, they do feel pretty good.
Yeah, I like it.
Then there you go. Okay, Jess, so we're going to use the template here to round over the four corners. And often you can do it just by setting up and using the router, but this is hardwood and we're kind of cutting along the grain. I don't want any blowout. I don't want any risk. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark the four corners, and then we're going to cut them on the bandsaw, and then just leave a little bit behind that we can take off with the router. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up so that these two edges, right, are nice and square to the edge of the part,
Okay.
and then just trace the end of the piece on all four corners.
Okay.
And again, we're going to leave the line behind on maybe a 32nd of an inch beyond that at the bandsaw. All right, so now we're going to use the bandsaw here. So the bandsaw, it's a blade that just keeps cutting, and it's a band. It goes all the way around, comes up and down. And the nice thing is it cuts very efficiently, and it stays pretty cool because the band is cooling as it's going around. But we're just going to come in, and we're going to cut the corner. We can notch this out. We're just going to cut this off, and we'll stay close to the line, but we want to leave some behind for the router to take off.
Okay.
I'm going to start with one of the walnut sides, and then you can do the other 3.
Okay.
You got to wait for the bandsaw to wind up. All right, so now I'm just going to come in, and again, just watching that line. And I'm not trying to turn it. See, I'm not even following the line there.
Yeah.
I can come in and make a second cut. There we go. So now we've cut, but you can see I've left the line there. So our jig will be able to cut. We don't want an uncut part after you do the jig.
Yeah. All right.
Don't be afraid to cut further away from the line until you're confident. You can always come back and do it a little bit closer.
I think I'm going to do that. Okay.
Yeah, it's a matter of getting a feel for it. There you go. That's probably fine.
Okay.
So now rotate to the next one.
Just going to try that snippet again. All right.
Again, nothing wrong with sneaking up on the cut.
That felt easier to cut for me. I don't know, but is this
The
one
walnut
harder?
is a little bit softer than the maple,
Okay.
no doubt about it. And I wouldn't go much more than that. You know, that's probably good. We're just taking the main part of it out of the way.
Got it.
Probably didn't absolutely need to do it at all, but it's just easier. Less likely to have issues with the router. There you go. So we're going to use a bearing bit. This is what we call a pattern bit. The bearing is at the top. A flush trim bit has the bearing at the bottom of the cutter. Now this one happens to have a bearing on both sides, which is often convenient because you can use it either way. But as you can see, we don't have enough room to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
So we're going to make the first half of the cut with this bit, right? And then that's going to leave the round that we'll flip the board over and then use this one to follow that.
Got it. Cool.
Now we're only going to need the template for the first cut. Now again, this is called a pattern bit because the bearing's on top. The bearing follows the pattern. In this case, the pattern is our jig.
Yeah.
Okay? It could be a pattern that cuts out a shape. I've done, any number of pieces where it's a fish shape or whatever. And the pattern bit will help you follow that. So we're going to clamp this in place using the dovetail clamps. But first we're going to set all this in.
And you want to use this, right?
Yeah, we're going to use, that's the base for our router.
Okay.
And so the router rides on the base, but the base is removable to make it easier to put the bits in and out. And then the base also helps us adjust the height. So there's a locking mechanism here, and then we'll adjust the height by turning this knob. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it down here. We've got the lock open, and then you can see that the bearing is touching the top of the template.
Yeah.
So we'll lock that. That's in a good place. Now what we're going to do is we're going to clamp this in place. The bar is already clamped to our table. We're going to work that around, and then I'm going to do the first one again, and then you can do the others from there.
Okay.
So we're going to line this up so that the edges of the template are against our board, the edge of our board, your cutting board. And then we're going to secure it in place with the dovetail clamps. Now here's the fun part about the dovetail clamps. They're holding the piece in place, but the head is inside the template. So they're not in our way while we're working.
Exactly.
Which is the whole point behind the MatchFit system. So now the router is free to ride around that corner. And if you look at the bit, you can see that the cutting edge is going to spin this way. We want, as the cutting edge cuts in, it wants to pull the bit into the wood. The template and the bearing keep it from doing that. So the bit's going to hold itself tight against this template. If we tried to go the other way, then the bit is going to try to, it's going to actually push the cut away.
So you're saying like don't go backwards.
Right. We're gonna come in, and we're gonna go. You always go counterclockwise on the outside of a template, clockwise on the inside of the template.
Got it.
So we're going to plug this in. We always have all the power tools unplugged while we're messing around with them, setting up and putting bits in. And this is a 3/4 inch bit. I'm going to reduce the RPM just a little bit, probably around 15,000. Hearing protection in. Start in the corner. And there you can see we've got a nice smooth curve.
Cool.
Both hands on the grips. You're going to hold, the bearing is going to, see how you can feel the jig?
Yeah.
You're going to hold the thing tight to the jig, and then as you come around, pivot with this arm like that, right?
Okay.
All right. Let the thing come up to speed. All right, go for it. Perfect. Take it off. There you go. Perfect. Into the template. Yep. Follow it around. There you go. Boom. Nice. All right. So now what we've done is we've put a second bearing in here, and we're going to use the top bearing on this one. And that makes it what we call a flush trim bit. So it's going to flush trim this part that isn't cut with what we've already done on the bottom. So this time we're going to, once again, we're going to set the base on the router. But this time when we adjust the height, we're going to adjust it so that the bearing is riding on that part down below. We can bring it up a fair amount here. But we want to make sure that the bearing is on the part we've already cut, but that the cutter is extending beyond the part that we need to cut, which it is in this case. So we can lock that. That's good. Now we'll plug in. And again, I'll do the first one, and then you can do the subsequent ones. So it's essentially the same process. The difference is we don't have to worry about the template. So we're going to start up against the wood. I'm going to start with I'm going to turn the bit on with just a little bit of space between the bit and the wood. I'll bring it over, and then I'm just going to follow it around. Very much the same moves we just did. Almost no step between the two.
Bravo.
All right. Actually, let me spin it one more time. We can do both of these from the same setup.
Oh, hold on. There you go.
All right, it's all on you.
Alrighty.
So you're going to start off the thing a little bit.
Okay.
Come in and follow it around. Okay, good. Wait for it to stop. Now you can go back and do this corner. So you're going to start here and come around this way.
Okay. Wow.
And now we got one more to do. All right, now this side. Ready?
Yep.
There you go. Now all your corners are rounded. All right, Jess, so this time we're going to use the ring clamps here from our CNC Workholding set. Just this part's almost heavy enough not to worry about it, but just to be on the safe side, we're going to go ahead and put these in. And these are basically just cam clamps. So we're going to set them with, there's a little icon on here that shows a lock, an unlocked padlock, and then you can turn it in either direction to lock it. So we're going to do that on both of these, just so it doesn't move too much. Now, what we've got here is we've got a little round over bit. It's about 1/8 of an inch round over, so it's just going to ease these edges. I always like, I don't want things too round. I like a nice sharp edge, but obviously on a cutting board you don't want a sharp edge. So we're just going to ease it over. The base is extended beyond the sub base is extended beyond the base of the router a little bit. And it's sealed over here, so you can hold it here to keep it from tipping. We're going to just let the bit catch, the bearing will engage with the side, and we're just going to follow the side all the way around. And see, because the clamps are low profile, we can just follow all the way around. The only thing we have to be careful of is that the bearing is not below our finger cuts, right? Because if the bearing rode into this finger cut, it would allow, we'd cut deep.
Yeah.
We don't want that, but there's plenty of room there.
I see.
So we can make it work. So I'm just going to do a little bit of it, and then I'll let you finish it off.
Okay.
Now, first I got to plug it in. When the bit first encounters the wood, it is going to grab a little bit, but it's a small bit, so it shouldn't grab much, but just be aware of it when it happens, and you'll probably see it when I do it here.
Okay.
I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to come around the corner a little bit, and then we'll let you get back into it.
Okay.
Now I'm going to hold it here. I'm going to let the bit engage. And in this case, you want to keep moving. If you have to come back and recut a little bit, that's better. If you pause, you're going to get a burn mark, and then that'll have to get sanded out. It's not hard, but it's a hassle.
Yeah.
So you're just going to follow right around and let the bit do its work.
Okay.
So, yep, hold it there. The switch is right here on the front.
Okay.
Now bring it in. There you go. You're just going to follow right around. Keep going. Perfect. Now you've got a nice, easy edge there.
Wow, yeah, that looks great.
So the next step, we're going to put this back on the CNC and we're going to cut the blood groove. Well, all right, Jess, welcome back to the Microjig shop. We're going to be putting the juice groove into your cutting board today, and we're going to use the CNC machine to do it. You can put the juice groove in using a simple template and a hand router, but in our case, we're going to make the juice groove go all the way around your cutting board, and then in the corner, we're going to put in a little triangular well for things to collect there so it doesn't spill over while you're cutting, like, let's say, a nice big roast. So let me grab your board. So we've got a bit in here already. This is from our friends at Woodpeckers. It's a juice groove bit, so it's going to cut the bottom of the juice groove round, and then it'll lightly round over the top edge as we go along, but we've already programmed it, so it'll make the triangular part here, and then it'll cut the juice groove all the way around, about 1 inch in on each side. So we're going to lock our board in using the MatchFit Workholding system on our CNC. So we've got the edge guides locating this corner. Even though it's rounded, we know where the corner is. And we'll work to that. And the board's pretty heavy. We don't have to hold it down too much, but we definitely don't want it moving.
And these are the ramp clamps?
These are actually the ring clamps.
Ring clamps.
And this one over here is the ramp clamp.
Okay.
So it has the ramp that moves this down in, and you can't really see on the camera here, but the ring clamps are what we call an eccentric cam. So as you turn it, the edge moves in and out, so we can lock it in and tear it. We can lock it and unlock it by hand in just a few seconds. It's really good for quickly removing pieces, but this is in good shape. It's not going to go anywhere. So now we'll start up the router, the CNC, and we'll start, I'll walk you through the process of actually doing it. So what we're going to do is we're going to fire up the machine. Okay, and you'll notice on the controller here, it has to boot up like any computer does. Now, the first thing this machine wants you to do is find home. Okay, and it says all access home. Imagine you're in your own bedroom in the middle of the night and the power goes out and there's absolutely no light. So what do? You get up out of bed and you know your room, you know where everything is, but you kind of reach out a hand and you just walk over until you touch a wall. Yeah. And once you touch the wall, now you know where you are relative to the room, right? Same thing here. The machine doesn't know whether or not we moved it while it was off. So the first thing we're going to do is set the homes. So in this case, it's asking if we want to all access home. So we're going to say, okay. It's going to come up in Z, which is up and down, first, so that any bit or anything gets out of the way. Then it'll come over in Y and come back in X at the same time until it finds it has little sensors that will tell it when it's home. So go ahead and push the yellow button that says Origin OK.
Okay.
And then whenever something's going on, you're going to hold that. And if something goes bad, hit the red stop button.
Got it.
But you shouldn't need to do that just yet. So just hit the limit switch on the Y-axis. Now it's going to come back until it hits X, and then the three of them will find themselves and just settle out. And if you look here, you'll see, okay. So now it's ready to go, and it says our flash disk is okay, so that's where we have our program. Now we're not at 0 yet, so if you push the yellow button again, that's going to take us to the origin. And the origin in this case is right here where this corner is. And that's what we've set up. So, and we can check and see by lowering the Z height. And this is one of the reasons that we want to play this game, because it's very hard to see with this being rounded over whether or not this is in the corner, but it actually is. All right, so now that it's homed, and we've got our origin set, this is where we set the start point of the whole program. We do need to set the Z height. When you put a bit in here, there's nothing to register it up and down. The bit could be out a little bit more or in a little bit more. We don't know. And then the thickness of our material isn't known either. So what we're going to do is we're going to touch the tip of this bit to the top of the material, tell the computer that's where the two meet, and it'll handle everything from there. So what we're going to do is, this is your Y, front to back. This is your X, side to side. Positive is going away from you, negative is coming towards you. So push on the the Y plus for just a little bit. Yep, keep going. A little more. Okay, and now do X plus and just come over to about here.
Okay.
That's good. We just want to be onto the material. Now, on some machines, you bring this down until it just touches and you can use a piece of paper like a feeler gauge, but we actually have an electric connection here. So I'm going to put this under the tool. The machine knows how thick this block is. So this gray button here that says tool set, go ahead and push that. And so now it knows where the bit is going to meet there.
Very smart.
Well, the thing is, the trick to programming is the machine's going to do what we tell it to do, not necessarily what we want it to do. So this is all set. I'm going to go ahead and put the dust shield on. Okay. So that'll help collect the dust. I'm going to turn the dust collector on. So even though we're not over the origin point, it doesn't matter. The computer knows where it is. So the next step is you're going to push the green button, and then that's accessing the thumb drive,
yep.
right? So now you're going to hit OK, the yellow button. Juice Groove is the program we want to run. You're going to push that. Now it's counting down. The bit is starting to turn,
Okay.
and now it should start doing its thing. And that sounds pretty good, but you always want to be ready to hit that red button just in case.
Got it.
Now you can tell by the sound when you get a little bit of experience, even using a hand router, the sound will tell you how well the bit is cutting. And this sounds okay. We're doing 2 steps. We're going down a full, I want to say a ½ inch, I think, with this bit. So we're going to do it in 2 passes. It's just a little bit easier on the bit. And where we've got all this different grain in different directions, it'll be cleaner in our cutting.
Yeah.
But this is a really nice bit, and it should do the job well. So it's starting at the center of our triangle, and it's working all of that out. And then for some reason, instead of just going from there around the perimeter, it'll go in a different direction. Sometimes it's hard to figure out why the computer does things in the order it does. So now it's going to go over to the front edge over there.
Yeah.
But see how nice this looks already.
Yeah, it does.
And now it's going to do the groove all the way around the outside. And it looks like just about where we want. And then it'll come through here, connect with our well, and go around. But then it's going to do the whole thing a second time. Looks like we're getting nice chips. We're not getting a lot of dust, which is important. That means the bit is cutting correctly. Nice flaky chips like this means that the bit's cutting at the speed it should. If it's going too slow, it makes dust, and that just generates heat. Now when it reaches this corner, then it's going to come back here and start the whole thing again. Now, if you want to just push that Y positive button, just let it run back until the head's out of the way of the board, we can take a look. There you go. Let's hang that right there. So now,
Wow.
yeah, we have a nice juice groove here. We'll need just a tiny bit of sanding in the pocket here, where you can see the little V's, but that's because we got a round bottom bit doing the job. But these look perfect.
Yeah, they look great.
Yep. Very nice. So that'll get the next step. We're going to power sand the whole thing lightly. And then what we're going to do is we're going to apply a coat of mineral oil, and we're going to sand it by hand, what we call a wet sand or a slurry sanding. And that way, as we sand it, any minor little, almost invisible gaps between your glue ups here will get filled with the mineral oil and slurry of the wood, and that will seal the board and give you the protection you need. So the next time we get together, we'll do a quick sanding with the power, and then we'll use the mineral oil and sand it, and then we'll let that dry for a day or two, and then we'll go ahead and do the actual application of oil.
Great.
So we're coming right along, a little bit of sanding, and we're very close to the end.
Woohoo.
All right. Okay, Jess, so today we're going to start out by doing a little hand sanding. You're not going to be able to get power sanders down inside your juice groove here. And we've got, you know, a little bit of line here. It's really not critical, but it'll look nicer if that's nice and smooth. So we're going to just start out with some regular sandpaper. This is just standard stuff you can get anywhere. One of the fun things you can do is if you use a sharp or a straight edge with a good clean edge on it, we can set that, and the sandpaper tears pretty easily using the straight edge. And then from there we can fold it, and that'll let you grip it more easily. And then as you work it, it'll get a little softer and easier to work with. But you're just going to start in, and using like the corner of it, we're going to come in here and do this part, and then you can work the corners out there. And we're just going to try and get this all nice and smooth, and then we'll work around the outside edges.
Okay.
Now, sometimes it can be hard to see exactly how much you've gotten and whether there's any scratches or anything. Watch yourself. So we don't want to put like the oil on here because it won't be able to come out again, but a little bit of alcohol, and you'll be able to start seeing the grain and stuff.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then as the alcohol evaporates, it'll be very quick. You can see there's a little bit more here, right there. Okay. But this is looking pretty good, so we're almost there with that. Let's give it a little bit more. So the next step is we're going to do a little power sanding so that we can get this top smooth and neat. We're going to take care of the little bit of burn marks from the CNC. You can feel there's just a little bit of roughness there in the middle. So we're going to go over all of this, just the whole flat. You're going to want to keep the sander nice and flat on the top. We're not going to worry about digging this way.
Okay.
And this is what we call a random orbit sander. So as it's spinning this way, it's also going to be orbiting. And you can kind of see that as it does it. So that, what it does is, if it was just an orbital spinning sander, it would leave swirl marks. This is going to not leave the swirl marks. And then it's connected to the vacuum with these holes so that it's going to remove the dust as we're working. So that doesn't get behind either. It'll leave some in the groove, but that's okay. We don't worry about that. So you're going to hold it this way. We can adjust the speed if we want to. The trigger's right here. And I would, start it right on the wood, but then you're just going to lightly hold it down and let it work its way around, and we'll see how you do with that from here.
Okay.
I think we're on, right? Yeah. There you go. You don't have to press down real hard. Let it spin.
Okay.
And then you're just going to start working your way around. And if you watch the top, you can see here, see how clean that is compared to this? So you could start working your way through all that. And then sometimes on a flat surface like this, we can put some light pencil marks down, and you'll be able to see where you removed the pencil marks. Now, if this starts getting caught,
that's what it was.
Yeah, what you can do is kind of put this over your shoulder.
Yeah.
We'll move the vacuum over a bit.
Okay.
There you go. And now you don't have to worry about that trapping you up. But just kind of work back and forth and side to side, and then just be real methodical so that we make sure we cover the whole top.
Got it.
All right, now you can see the line here from the CNC.
Okay.
And here, so we're going to
focus
want to
on
make sure we get that. There's a similar one across here.
I see.
So make sure you get the edges real well. The center looks like it's getting pretty good. Again, a little bit of a burn mark there. So
Yep.
just again, back and forth. Don't worry about overlapping the sanding as you go.
Okay.
That'll be just fine. And like mowing a lawn, you've got to overlap each piece as you go, or else you miss bits. So just take your time, let the machine do the work.
Okay.
Let's spin it around so you can work that side.
Okay.
So we're using our MatchFit work holding system here, and that just holds the piece for you in the sides, just like on the CNC. And then we've got the edge guides, the ramp clamps here.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah, it works out pretty well, and it holds it perfectly steady for doing the sanding. So now we've rotated the piece around. So this edge here. You can see the little burn line right there, just a little bit. And right here, you can feel a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
So let's work this. So work from the center back to this side.
Okay.
That's looking pretty good. All right. This feels good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over. Yeah.
It's like a dolphin skin or something.
Yeah, it gets much, much smoother. But I am going to throw down some parchment paper, partially just to protect the surface we just created, but also because as we go forward and start doing the slurry sanding, we're going to want to protect our table from the oil. So we'll just start laying down some parchment paper here. So now we're going to do the same thing with the opposite side. And again, you can see how you can see all the lines, you can feel it. So this definitely you're going to have to spend a little time doing that. We can go to a rougher grade of sandpaper, which will remove things faster. But again, that didn't take very long doing the other side with the 220, and I think we're better off working with that.
Yeah.
It's just safer.
All right. Let's do this.
But again, just concentrate on the half that's next to you, and we can spin the board around when you're done with that side.
Okay.
Good. Now, when you do the other side, overlap the middle here, and that should take care of the rest of that.
Okay.
And yes, sometimes with many projects, finishing the project can take as long as making it. It's not unusual. Finishing is often the longest step.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but it's
A lot
not
of
fun.
finishing work. All right, here we go.
Okay, so now, Jess, we're going to work on the sides. And so what we're doing is you can hold the thing on the top and sand the edges this way, but it's a little bit more difficult. And because we have this nice drop edge on our table here, you can sand this part, and then we'll round over the corners, flip it around, do the other side. We can make 4 passes that way. We're going to start with the hand sanding. We're going to clean out these finger holes, and you can use the sandpaper to take a little bit of the sharpness out of right here, and that'll feel better when you use it. So go ahead and start there, and then we'll go back to the power sander to do the flat edges.
Got it.
It doesn't have to be super round, just so it feels comfortable when you run your hands across it.
Okay, yeah, I think this is
All right.
This is good.
So now it gets a little bit trickier, and this is definitely where you want to use both hands on the sander. So what we're going to do here is, again, you're going to start here and be ready for it. You can hold it up just a little bit while it starts.
Okay.
And then come down in, and you're going to go back and forth. The tricky part is to make sure it's not tilting like this. So we don't want it tilting this way. But then when you get to the end here, you can roll out into the to transition so that we don't get a step. There's a little bit of a line here right now. When we hand cut it with the router, we're going to take some of that out. So we're going to work it this way. And then as we come into the corner, we can round it right over. Then we come this way and do the same. And it's gonna want to kick and feel, so don't hesitate to hang on to it.
Okay. All right, so this side still needs a
just
passes?
Go ahead and practice with what we've got.
Okay.
And then we'll move it around. Nice and flat. There you go. And then as you come into the corner, you can let it roll. And then back again. And then we're going to come over this way, rotate it in, and come back, just like that. Once you start doing it, your muscle memory will take over, and it'll be easier to replicate.
Yeah.
All right. Now we'll go ahead and grab that clamp. Yep, pull the trigger. Just pull it out a little bit. Just leave it right where it is. And then we'll take this, rotate it 90 degrees.
Yeah, can we take a minute to appreciate that? How easy it is?
Yeah. The squeeze clamps make it very easy. Go ahead and push that one in.
Like that, right?
Yep, that's fine. Okay. Nice and tight. Then you can actually just push it and then clamp it as well. All right, so now same process here. We don't have to do the hand sanding because we don't have the finger hole, but you're going to want to do the same, rounding it over, rolling it through the corners as you did it before. And it's okay to start above, because if you start on, especially when you're not standing on it, the whole thing wants to move. So just above the surface, you can turn it on and then lay it down in.
Okay.
There you go. That'll do. Excellent.
Okay. Was that the last side?
That's it. That was 4 sides.
Oh, cool.
Today we're going to actually start finishing your cutting board for the, get it done so you can start using it. There are a couple of spots where we've got little gaps in the glue ups. They're not structural. It's mostly just where a blade might have flexed or something like that. No big deal. And what we're going to do to solve that is we're going to do what we call slurry sanding or wet sanding, but rather than using water, we're going to use mineral oil. So essentially, we do need to use a wet dry paper, and this is a new product from 3M. It's a funky purple color, but a wet dry paper because you don't want the paper backing of your sandpaper to get wet, start coming apart, and all of a sudden you'll have grit on your cutting board rather than what we want to do.
Yeah.
So the point here is we're going to use the oil. We're going to apply a little bit to the top of the project, and then we're going to sand in the oil. So we're just going to lay some down, and we're actually going to sand using the oil. And what's going to happen is the dust that you would normally sand up and blow away is going to mix with the oil. And then that's going to get filled down into those cracks and crevices in between. So as we work the oil in, we'll start to build what we call a slurry. And it's handwork, but it's going to take a little while. But you can see it's starting to build up here, right? See, the oil is looking like thick.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that. And as we do it, that's going to go ahead and start filling in some of those cracks for us as we go. And you can start seeing the colors start to come out as well. There's some of that slurry that, we want to work that into all of those little cracks. So it's just a matter of just pour out a little bit of oil at a time and just start working it in. And at first it's just going to slide across the top, but then as the oil starts to work, it's going to partly soak in too. And so as it soaks in and you start working it, you'll start covering up and filling some of those holes or those gaps, and you're going to get a good workout today.
Good.
Yeah, you can feel it right in here in the shoulder, but you can see how the slurry is And we're going to have to wipe this off afterwards, but you can see how the slurry is starting to form. And again, on our paper, so we're going to want to make sure that that gets into all those cracks and crevices. So here you can see it's gotten in. We've got some over here, so just watch them as you go, but you'll see that they start to fill in. So I'll let you go ahead and take over.
Okay.
Again, just a little bit, a couple of drops of oil at a time. You don't have to worry about, you can't really put too much on at this point because it's going to all soak into the wood anyways over time. Let's see, first you can feel it hardly feels like you're doing anything.
Yeah.
But as it starts to absorb into the wood, and you get to the edges, you'll feel it more and more. And you can even watch, like here's where one of those cracks is. So as you go through, you know, look for where they are, and then you'll be able to see whether or not you're filling them in. Right.
Yeah, this is looking
But
really
now you
pretty.
can feel it starting to, it's all about touch and feel. And then we'll wipe it all, once we get done with this, and you got to go over the whole thing. All sides, top, bottom, the whole bit. But once we're done with that, we'll start just actually applying the oil itself. We'll wipe all the slurry off, we'll clean it up good, and then we'll talk about applying the oil.
Okay, and how does the slurry like stay in there? Does it?
Well, the oil, yeah, it's going to stay in there because it's going to absorb the oil, and the wood around it's going to absorb the oil, so it's going to actually become part of it. Now, using mineral oil is one thing. If we had larger cracks or I was worried about it, if it wasn't food grade, I might use like a tung oil or more of a skinning oil, which would actually harden over time, and that would do the same. And that's basically what you do with a grain filler. But we don't need a grain filler here because we're using a very tight grained wood. We just want to fill in some of the cracks. But yeah, the only way you would be able to get it out again later is if you actually took a very fine knife and started digging at it.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. So like here's one right here that you can see. So make sure you get in there and get that slurry. Yeah. See how it's filling? You can see it like here it's not, but there it is.
Look how pretty.
I know. And that's with the slurry on it. Wait till you clean it. Because then as you clean it, the maple becomes even lighter. And it has more of a variation, a contrast. Thank you.
How's that looking?
It's looking good. Now you can go ahead and do the juice groove as well, and then the outer edges. We'll just keep going with this, and it's going to take you a little while, but we'll get through the whole thing.
Okay.
All right, so we got it all slurry sanded. We wiped it all back. Yeah, this did a really nice job of filling all those cracks. You can just see there's no more gaps at all. And it doesn't even, it doesn't really affect the look because the dark walnut worked in with the dark walnut, and it looks really, really good. So obviously we did some oiling while we were doing that, but we're going to do another coat. So I'm just going to pour a bunch in the middle. And then you can use a rag to apply this, a foam brush. I've got a couple of these little applicators, so it's got the little cup to keep it clean while you're using it, but it's basically like a foam brush, and you could just use that to just put oil all over the thing. And again, don't worry about over-applying. A lot of it is going to soak in really quickly, and then any pools left over at the end, we'll go ahead and wipe off with a rag. But we're going to give it like 15 or 20 minutes after you apply the oil before we wipe it off.
Okay.
So go ahead and finish applying. And again, if you start feeling like you're not spreading it, you don't have enough, put a little more oil on it. Now, they make all sorts of commercial grade cutting board finishes and stuff. You'll see people talking about wood butter and all the other stuff. And if you want to use that kind of stuff, it's great. But I've just found that mineral oil, it's cheap, it's inexpensive, it's completely non-toxic. I mean, it's literally medication given as a laxative.
Yeah, keep it simple, right?
Well, but it's also incredibly inexpensive. I mean, you buy a bottle of mineral oil at the grocery store or Walgreens or someplace like that, it costs almost nothing. It's like $5 or $6. And then this much will cover several cutting boards. And in fact, as you go through this one, as we said, once a day for a week, once a week for a month, once a month for a year,
Yep.
you're going to see that, it's just more economical. You can already see like here, it's already soaked in. but here it's like not so much. And, you know, you can keep spreading it, but basically, once you know you've covered the whole surface, then I would go ahead and, you know, just we'll let it sit for a few. Let's bring this over there. We'll let it sit for a few. You can do the edges if you want and spin it around. Do the edge here. And then once this side is dry, we'll wipe it back, and then you can do the underside.
Okay.
And then from there, you'll start flipping it over and doing it back and forth. But this is looking really, really nice. Again, I pointed out to you that this soaked in and the rest didn't. This is dry again.
Wow.
If
So
you see it, you can see that there's like, yeah, there's oil here, but not as much there.
Yeah.
Very thirsty. And you can go ahead and keep spreading over that if you want to. But the wood's going to absorb as much as it wants. And that's okay at this point. That's what we want it to do. And the fun part is that because we're using oil, if the wood gets wet, the grain raises, it becomes fuzzy, and you have to sand it back. That's not a bad thing. If you're using water-based finishes, a lot of times I'll actually apply water the first time without any finish and let it raise the grain and sand it back, because then when I apply my finishes, it's cleaner. But the oil will not do that. So you can see this thing still feels just as smooth as it was before.
Yeah.
The oil finish will not raise the grain. So we won't have that problem. That looks awesome.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, that looks really, really good. You should be proud of yourself. This is quite the project for a first time.
I couldn't have done without you.
Yeah, but you know what? You did most of the work, so this is really nice. And literally, this is something that your grandchildren will be arguing over long after you're gone. And that's one of the nice things about woodworking, is that you can create things that are not only beautiful, but also functional and will last for generations. You know. All right, let's let that sit for a little bit, and we'll wipe it off, and then you can do the back side.
All right,
but
cool.
from here, it's just a matter of finishing the oiling. You can take it home and do the rest of it from there. And, you know, we've got a project done.
Yay.
Now you get to think about what we're going to do next.
Yeah, I have a list already, so don't worry about that.
All right, we'll try it. Well, Jess, this has been great fun. I've had a great time, and this just came out absolutely gorgeous. I'm looking forward to working the next project.
Yeah, me too.
Excellent.
Thank you.